Welcome back to Control Alt Lead, the podcast from computing where we talk to IT leaders about what's moving in the market. This week, I'm talking to Joanna Drake, CIO at e-commerce retail platform THG, formerly the Hut Group, who has been on a massive modernization journey with her team. Fast growth and a series of acquisitions meant THG's infrastructure wasn't fit for purpose, and the company's storage was, and I'm quoting here, a mishmash of vendors and technologies. In this episode, Joe and I dive into the why and the how of the transformation, as well as the lessons learned and the successful outcomes. Please enjoy. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today on Control Alt Lead. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you about is your background, your role at THG.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been here for 6.5 years now. And the first 6 years of my role here was in the group CIO role. And in that role, I was responsible for all of the data centers and the infrastructure globally, all of the technology that staff use to do their jobs, and also things like global service operations. So things like our 24/7 global operations center, things like our client support teams, our billing teams, anything to do with basically supporting and looking after clients globally 24/7. And a big part of my role then, even though it's kind of like a CIO, very sort of infrastructure role, a big part of our business is a hosting business, and we engineer hosting and infrastructure products and services for hundreds of thousands of customers globally. So there was a very strong software engineering element to my role. And my role has expanded in the last 6 months to include also being the CTO of the e-commerce platform. So I've retained looking after all of the global infrastructure, but also looking after the e-commerce platform and all of the associated tooling that goes with that platform, all of the marketing tech, omni-channel, and also our sort of suite of mobile apps, native and web view apps that we supply to our clients, really.
That's great, and it's so interesting because the software engineering side, most IT leaders, that tends to fall by the wayside as they take on that C-level responsibility. So how interesting that
Yeah.
you've managed to keep that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly in infrastructure, which has become such a software business over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, especially, is very much about software infrastructure, like software infrastructure as a service, infrastructure as code, and actually building products and services for infrastructure clients is actually very complex business, because you're talking about cloud products and services that technical people are consuming and using. So they need to be really, really good quality. They need to scale and they need to be performant and secure. So coming sort of more from that infrastructure software engineering background and moving into this role means that those sort of elements were things that I was very used to in my day-to-day role as the CIO, which I'm taking very much into the CTO role with me.
Wonderful. And you talked about the e-commerce platform there. So you've recently
Yeah.
been through a big modernization program. What was the inspiration behind that? What pushed you to go for that modernization journey?
Yeah, so the modernization was very much the storage elements rather than the e-commerce platform. So it's kind of like all of the infrastructure that everything sits upon. So I'd say the e-commerce platform is more of just a constant evolvement. But when it comes to the infrastructure and the storage, because we'd grown very quickly as a business over a number of years, we found that when we were looking at our storage, firstly, it wasn't fit for purpose. When we were looking at how we wanted to evolve the e-commerce platform, some of the products and services we were building that really needed those AI elements and that compute power just wasn't there in the storage that we had. And then the storage that we had was a bit of a mishmash of, when things grow very quickly and you add another storage vendor with a different contract term, different technology, different footprints. When you're trying to get the most out of your data center footprint and you've got all these different sizes and shapes of storage units, it really needed a good looking at and a good standardizing of all of that. And that's where we sort of embarked on the journey where we ended up with Pure in modernizing our storage.
Okay, and that's Pure Storage. So
Yes, yeah.
how did you go about choosing that new solution, new vendor? What were your criteria and your KPIs that you were looking to fulfill there?
So there was a number of things. So of course, from a technology point of view, we needed really fast, speedy storage. Of course, that's a given. We were really looking to reduce our power, how much we actually pay on power, and we were looking to reduce our actual. So when I say footprint, I mean carbon footprint, but I also mean the actual physical footprint in the data center. You've only got so many racks in your data centers. We sell a lot of data center space. We don't want to use it up with all of our storage. So we wanted to reduce that. We also needed flexibility and scalability. So when we're actually forecasting our storage needs, we have clients that are very readily able to tell us how much storage they'll need, and there are others that just simply don't know. We work with a lot of gaming clients, and they could have a sudden peak in storage requirements if they're doing a launch of a massive game in Asia, and it will peak and then it will come back down again. So we really needed that ability to rapidly scale up and down. And we also needed a storage vendor that we culturally aligned with. So that's really, really important to us as a business. We're a very fast-paced, energetic, innovative organization. And we need to work with vendors that can match us in those things. And Pure absolutely fitted the bill when it comes to cultural alignment.
Brilliant. So uh, uh, cultural alignment was really important.
Yeah,
Um, the power use is, I think, really interesting because we see a lot of companies now wanting to improve their, their ESG performance.
yeah,
So it's fascinating that was actually one of the metrics that you wanted to fulfill. That was a
yeah,
hard metric for you. That's great.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people to keep happy with this piece of work. We needed to keep the CFO happy from a price point of view. And it's not just the price of the initial storage, it's the power and running it, but it's also the resources needed to run it, as in people. So one of the really interesting elements of this story is we don't have any storage engineers in our business at all. So we do not need a team of storage engineers to run our storage, and our storage estate is enormous and global. So that is really important. So from the CFO point of view, that ticks many, many boxes because Pure carry out so many of these elements for us. There's the cultural element, and then there's the ESG, ticking the box from the sustainability angle as well. But also putting the technology in place to allow us to build products and services, particularly the ones where we needed large storage for machine learning, particularly for our fraud project that we were building. So we needed to build this product because that was going to be a revenue stream for us as well. So another reason to keep the CFO happy is that we're going to save money, we're going to bring money in, and it ticks many boxes from a sustainability point of view as well.
Brilliant. So talk me through the rollout. How was that accomplished and how easy was it?
Um, very easy. So those questions are very easy. It's very easy to roll out. We rolled it out with zero downtime across all of our data centers, which is absolutely incredible. We cannot afford many seconds of downtime because e-commerce is a 24/7 global business. You can't announce large, hours of downtime there. And because of the way that Pure actually go about switching out the storage for us means that there's zero downtime. So we will manage to roll out across, it's in around about 15 data centers globally with zero downtime. So it's actually a really, really easy and quick rollout for us.
That's brilliant because I mean,
It's
speaking
the
as a
dream.
gamer, I know that gamers tend to be a bit
Oh,
impatient about downtime as well.
completely. And, when it comes to that resilience, but also speed and efficiency and network, we can't afford any blips in gaming. You can't shoot somebody and then a couple of seconds later, the hit happens. You need to have that resilience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So were there any challenges, any hiccups in the rollout that you had to overcome, or was it just a totally smooth process start to finish?
The rollout was a smooth process, start to finish. Where the interesting stuff happened was after the rollout. And I have spoken publicly about this because it was kind of the making of our relationship. So we had one of the worst days of our technical careers when the night before Black Friday, we had a storage failure in our London DC. Could not happen at a worst possible second in the year than when it happened. And that's when you really realize the strength of a relationship, is when you hit hard, when you hit a really big issue like that. Pure were incredible in the speed and the turnaround of getting to the DC, switching that storage unit out. And that was when we really realized that we were partnered with the right vendor, and that speed and agility and response are really like the signs of a really true partnership that we've got between the two organizations. So yeah, the rollout went brilliantly. We hit a major issue and Pure excelled in actually dealing with that issue. So it's sort of, even though it was a very difficult situation, it really sort of strengthened the relationship between us.
I'd love to talk to you just a bit more about the importance of valued partnerships, like the one you've got with Pure, of course.
Yeah.
How key is it for you as a CIO to nurture and foster those relationships with your partners?
It's critical because they're an extension of the team. We can't do things without our trusted vendors and partners. That's why the cultural alignment is really, really important. And I know, historically where we've had vendors that aren't particularly responsive or innovative or eager or match in the energy stakes. So we're quite an energetic, fast-paced organization. And when you're working with a partner and you've got an idea that you very quickly want to explore, and you'll get greeted with a response like, oh, our SVP of EMEA is in your area in 3 months' time, like we'll pencil in some time with them. That's not the type of response I'm needing. What I'm needing is to go, right, and who can you get on a call this afternoon, and let's talk this idea through and see what we can do. And the other thing we do very much is we've very much moved from managing or running these partnerships through task lists or sort of action-based relationship. They're very outcome-based rather than transactional. So we will spend time talking about our strategy and our vision and the outcomes that we need to get to. And we'll continue to do that with Pure. We've got lots of stuff we're working on to evolve the e-commerce platform. And we are going to need support and help and understanding from Pure that those are the things we're doing and the things that they can do to support, to help us achieve those things as quickly and efficiently as possible. So yeah, they're absolutely critical and are an extension of our team.
Brilliant. And I suppose for our listeners, have you got any advice on finding those partners and those vendors that match your energy, match your culture, who really take an interest and become that valued partner rather than just a client and customer relationship?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I started to do was share our values as a business. So we have a list of values about how we behave and how we operate as an organization. So one of the things I've done, and sometimes it's been a bit jarring and odd for some vendors to receive this list of values and behaviors from our organization from the CIO or the CTO, rather than a sort of tech spec or a list of requirements and non-functional requirements. And it's been interesting to sort of gauge the response to that in, do you know what, these values, they're so aligned with the way we operate, or why are you sending me this? Like, what does this mean? So that's something I've done, is sharing those values, because that's one way of even just gauging that initial response. And can we see your values? And all these really align, and how do you recognize these values and things like that? So a very non-technical introduction to a relationship. And I think you start to get a feel, even when you're going through the RFP stage, in how as a vendor initially, they're a vendor initially and you want them to become a partner that you have a relationship with, how they actually respond initially during that RFP phase is really important. But I would say as well, something I'm a massive believer in is, a number of us had worked with Pure in previous roles at previous organizations. So that experience is really important as well. When you go, I've actually worked with this organization before, and I know they operate in a way that could fit quite well with who we are, is invaluable. So a lot of this is about your network and previous organizations you've worked with in your career as well.
Great advice. Thanks for that, Joe. I suppose then the only other question I have for you is the results of your big transformation. How has it
Yeah.
been in the post-transformation period?
Yeah, sure. So one of the great things about the solutions that we got from Pure is the expansion capability. So we're able to expand within the chassis that we've already got. So we can increase our storage capacity with the same footprint within the DC, and they will literally go in and replace the elements of that storage array. So you've got more storage, but nothing's really changed. So that's invaluable because we are growing. We have products, particularly the fraud product that I mentioned earlier. Detect is a product we actually built for ourselves to manage fraud and actually decrease the amount of fraud that can happen in e-commerce, because the fraudsters are getting smarter. Our machine learning needs to be getting smarter. Our storage needs to get bigger for that machine learning. And we managed to actually reduce our fraud by 90%. So, that was an enormous result for us. Now, where we'll be evolving as a platform is looking to take that product and actually sell it as a standalone product that somebody could just go and buy off the shelf through a marketplace or whatever. So we need to be able to scale and sell that product really, really quickly, and Pure will need to support us in that from the storage requirements. The other thing was the power reduction, so an 80% reduction in our power usage. So our power bill's gone down, which is great, and a massive tick in what we're trying to achieve with our sustainability goals as well. And then the other thing is the resource costs have gone down in what it was taking to manage the storage, the historical storage that we had. Not to even mention the time that was spent with having so many different contracts and vendors we were managing. You're almost constantly renewing a storage contract because there were so many of them, and none of them ended at the same time. So I think as far as the results go, ticks many boxes, but we know we've got that expansion and scalability that we need to evolve our e-commerce platform as well.
That's brilliant. It sounds like a really successful project, and I'm glad to hear that there's been a great outcome for it. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining me to talk about the work with Pure today.
That's been my pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Control Alt Lead. Next time, I'll be talking to Leon Butler, IBM's CEO of the UK and Ireland. We go into the acquisitions of DataStax and HashiCorp, IBM's pursuit of small language models, and Leon's predictions for quantum computing. It's really important listening for anyone who wants to know the direction of travel for the IT market. Until then, you can always head over to computing.co.uk for more IT interviews, research, and analysis. Until next time.